What if one bomb could reach a target buried so deep, so heavily protected, that almost every weapon on Earth would simply bounce off it and fail? Only 20 of these bombs exist, and in the summer of 2025, the United States used more than half of them in a single night against Iran. Before we go further, hit that like button right now, because this story only gets heavier from here and you don't want to miss a second of it. Subscribe if you're new and send this to someone who loves real military history, because this one is going to stay with you. For years, Iran had been building something underground. Not a normal factory, not a normal bunker. A facility carved deep inside a mountain, wrapped in layer after layer of reinforced concrete and rock, designed with one purpose in mind: survival. Survival against airstrikes, survival against sabotage, survival against anything short of a direct nuclear hit. Intelligence agencies had been watching this site for almost 2 decades. Satellite images showed trucks, tunnels, ventilation shafts, and construction that made no sense for a civilian project. Analysts began connecting the dots. This wasn't just a storage site, it was a production hub tied to Iran's most sensitive weapons work, hidden far below the surface where regular bombs simply could not reach. And that created a massive problem for military planners. Because how do you destroy something you cannot even touch? A bomb dropped from a plane can be powerful, it can be precise, but precision means nothing if the weapon cannot physically punch through hundreds of feet of rock and concrete before it even reaches the target. This is where the story of one very specific bomb begins, a weapon so massive, so unusual, that most people had never even heard its name until that night. The GBU-57, also known as the Massive Ordnance Penetrator. A name that sounds almost too simple for what this thing actually does. Picture something the size of a small bus, but shaped like a giant steel spear. 30,000 pounds, roughly 20 feet long, built with a thick, dense metal casing that is engineered to survive and impact most objects which shatter under. This bomb is not designed to explode the moment it hits the ground. It is designed to keep going, to drill through layer after layer of rock and concrete using pure mass and speed before detonating deep underground, right where the enemy thinks they are safest. Think about that for a second. A weapon meant to solve a problem that almost nothing else on Earth could solve. Not fighter jets, not cruise missiles, not even most other bunker-busting bombs already in existence. Those weapons could damage the surface, maybe collapse an entrance, maybe disrupt operations for a while, but they could not reach the core. They could not touch the parts of the facility that actually mattered most. Engineers spent years studying how deep underground facilities are actually built. They studied soil density, rock types, concrete thickness, even how sound and shock waves travel underground. All of that research went into shaping this one weapon. Every inch of the GBU-57 exists because someone somewhere sat down and asked a simple but terrifying question. What would it actually take to reach a target buried this deep? The answer took years to perfect. Early tests were not perfect. Some prototypes failed to penetrate as deep as expected. Others broke apart under the pressure of impact before completing their job. Engineers went back, adjusted the metal composition, changed the shape, changed the fuse timing, and tested again and again. This bomb went through more than a decade of quiet development, largely unnoticed by the public because there was really only one target on Earth it was built for. That target was the underground facility in Iran. For 15 years, this weapon existed almost like an insurance policy. Built, tested, stored, but never actually used in real combat. Militaries sometimes build weapons they hope they never have to use. This was one of them, a tool created specifically for a worst-case scenario. And for a long time, that worst-case scenario stayed hypothetical. Then, in June of 2025, everything changed. Tensions between Israel and Iran had already been rising for years, but that month, it reached a breaking point. Israel launched a series of strikes against Iranian nuclear and military infrastructure, hitting facilities above ground, damaging power systems, and putting immense pressure on Iran's ability to defend its most protected sites. But there was still one problem Israel could not solve alone. Its own weapons were not powerful enough to reach the deepest levels of Iran's underground facility. No matter how advanced their air force was, some of Iran's most sensitive equipment sat too far below the surface for anything in Israel's arsenal to touch. Israel's strikes did real damage. They hit above-ground infrastructure, disrupted power supplies, and forced Iranian officials to scramble for a response. But the deepest, most protected sections of the underground site remained largely untouched, sitting safely below hundreds of feet of solid rock, almost mocking every effort made against it. For a facility built with survival as its entire purpose, this was exactly the outcome its designers had hoped for. That is when the United States stepped in. In a mission that would later be called Operation Midnight Hammer, American B-2 stealth bombers took off from a base in the United States, flying an extraordinarily long route toward Iran, refueling multiple times in the air, moving quietly through contested, Airspace under the cover of night. These aircraft are famous for one reason. They're almost invisible to radar. They can slip past advanced air defense systems that would immediately detect normal aircraft. And on this night, that invisibility mattered more than ever. 7 of these stealth bombers were part of the mission, each one carrying some of the most closely guarded weapons in the entire American arsenal, the GBU-57 Massive Ordnance Penetrator. Now here is where the story becomes almost unbelievable. Only 20 of these bombs exist in total. This is not mass-produced. Hardware. Each one takes enormous time, cost, and precision engineering to build. And on this single night, the United States dropped 14 of them. 14 out of a global supply of 20. Think about that for a moment. More than half of the entire stockpile of the most powerful non-nuclear bunker buster on the planet was used in one mission, against one target in one night. 12 of these bombs were aimed at the primary underground facility, dropped in pairs down specific access points designed to reach the most protected levels below. 2 more were used against a second nuclear related site nearby. The plan required extreme precision. These weapons were not simply dropped and hoped for the best. Each one had a uniquely programmed fuse, calculated based on depth, angle, and the exact structure it needed to pass through before detonating. If any of this timing was even slightly off, the bomb could detonate too early, wasting its potential, or too late, missing the critical structure below. There was no room for guesswork. Imagine being one of the planners responsible for calculating these numbers. Depth estimates based on years-old satellite imagery, rock density estimates based on geological surveys. Every variable had to be accounted for, because unlike a normal airstrike, there would be no second chance to adjust mid-mission. Once these bombers were in the air, committed to their route, the plan had to work exactly as designed the very first time. According to military officials who later spoke about the mission, every single one of the bombs hit exactly where it was intended to hit. Not close, not approximately, exactly. Let's slow down here for a second, because this is the part that really deserves attention. If you're finding this story as fascinating as I am, do something small for me. Comment one word that describes how this makes you feel right now. Shocked, amazed, worried, whatever it is. I actually read these, and it helps me know what stories to bring you next. So how does a bomb like this actually destroy something buried hundreds of feet underground? It's not really about the explosion itself. It's about what happens in the moments just before it. As this 30,000-pound weapon slams into the ground at extremely high speed, its dense metal shell allows it to keep pushing downward, layer after layer, cutting through rock and concrete using raw kinetic force. Only after reaching the calculated depth does the internal explosive charge detonate. And when it does, the damage does not come from fire and shrapnel the way most people imagine an explosion. Deep underground, in a sealed tunnel system, the real killer is pressure. A shockwave rips through the confined space with nowhere to escape. Blast energy bounces off walls, compresses air violently, and tears through equipment, wiring, and structural supports. Officials who reviewed the aftermath described the damage as a combination of overpressure and blast force ripping through the tunnels, destroying critical machinery that would be nearly impossible to rebuild quickly. This is why the weapon does not need to be perfectly centered on every piece of equipment inside. Once it detonates at the right depth, inside a tunnel system, the pressure wave itself becomes almost as destructive as the initial blast. Satellite images taken in the days after the strike showed something remarkable. Precise, clustered impact points directly above where the underground facility was believed to be located. No wide, scattered damage, no signs of missed targets, just tight, deliberate strike patterns exactly where military planners had aimed. For a mission 15 years in the making, that level of precision was not luck. It was the result of an enormous amount of planning, intelligence gathering, and testing that most people will never fully see or understand. Consider everything that had to align perfectly for that kind of accuracy to happen. The intelligence teams who tracked the site for years, quietly building a detailed picture of tunnels and access points nobody outside a small circle was ever meant to see. The engineers who calculated exactly how a 30,000-pound object would behave as it tore through rock at extreme speed. The pilots who trained for a mission they may have spent years preparing for, without ever knowing exactly when or if it would actually happen. Every one of those pieces had to come together at the exact same moment, on the exact same night, for this to work the way it did. Now, here is something important to understand about military strikes like this. The people involved do not simply celebrate and assume success. In fact, defense officials were careful to say that the true effectiveness of the strike would take time to fully assess. Understanding exactly how much damage was done deep underground, particularly to equipment that cannot be seen from satellite images, requires detailed analysis using specialized intelligence tools. That process does not happen overnight. This distinction matters. A successful strike from a weapons and precision standpoint is not automatically the same as a strike that completely ends a nuclear or weapons program. The bombs hit their targets. That much was confirmed. But the deeper question, how badly the underground capability itself was damaged, took much longer to fully answer. Still, from a purely engineering and operational standpoint, this mission represented something historic. It was the very first time this specific bomb had ever been used in real combat. Not in testing, not in simulation. In an actual high-stakes military operation, against the exact type of target it had been built for since day one. Think about the emotional weight sitting inside that fact. A weapon designed specifically for one purpose, built patiently over more than a decade, finally used for the very first time in exactly the scenario its creators had imagined. That almost never happens with military technology. Most advanced weapons are built as deterrents, hoping they will never actually need to be fired. This was the rare moment where the theory finally met reality. Before we go even deeper into what happened after the strike, I want you to imagine something for a second. Imagine spending 15 years of your career working on a single weapon, testing it, improving it, watching it fail, then succeed, then fail again, until finally, on one specific night, it does exactly what you always believed it could do. That is the story behind this bomb, just as much as the story of the strike itself. If a video like this deserves anything, it deserves 15 seconds of your time. Tap that share button and send it to one person who would find this as unbelievable as you just did. It genuinely helps this channel grow, and it means more than you'd think. Let's talk about why this facility mattered so much in the first place. Iran's underground site was not built overnight. It was constructed deep inside a mountain range, hidden away from easy observation, using layers of natural rock, combined with reinforced concrete structures. This combination made it one of the most protected facilities of its kind anywhere in the world. Intelligence agencies had actually discovered the existence of this site years before its full purpose was publicly confirmed, based on unusual construction patterns and ventilation systems that did not match any typical civilian project. The location itself was chosen carefully, nestled deep inside a mountainous region, far from major cities, surrounded by natural rock. Formations that made the site even harder to study from the outside. Every layer of protection, the mountain itself, the reinforced concrete, the depth below the surface, was added deliberately, almost like a puzzle designed specifically to defeat every weapon that existed at the time it was built. Once its purpose became clear, it instantly became one of the most sensitive and closely watched locations on the planet. For years, the international community debated how to respond to a facility like this. Diplomatic pressure, economic sanctions, negotiations. All of these tools were used with varying levels of success, but the physical facility itself remained standing, buried safely beneath the surface, seemingly untouchable by conventional military means. This is exactly why the Massive Ordnance Penetrator became such a critical weapon in modern military planning. It wasn't built for a hypothetical war. It was built because there was one specific known target on Earth that regular bombs simply could not reach. And when the moment finally came to use it, everything, the testing, the design changes, the years of frustration, all of it led to this single night in June. Now let's shift for a moment to the human side of this story, because it's easy to focus only on the technology and forget the sheer scale of what a mission like this actually requires. Executing an operation like this is not as simple as one plane dropping one bomb. This involved more than 100 aircraft working together, stealth bombers carrying the actuator. L weapons, fighter jets providing protection along the route, refueling aircraft keeping everything in the air for the incredibly long journey required to reach the target and return safely. And beneath the surface of the ocean, a submarine capable of launching cruise missiles played its own role in the broader operation, helping to suppress any potential air defense threats before the main strike even began. Every single piece of this mission had to move with precise timing. If even one part of this chain failed, whether it was refueling, navigation, communication, or timing, the entire mission could have been compromised. And remember, this entire operation took place at night, deep inside contested airspace, thousands of miles from home. The level of coordination required for something like this is almost impossible to fully put into words. It is the result of not Jew-saint advanced technology, but years of training, simulation, and preparation by thousands of people who most of the public will never know by name. And through all of that complexity, every single bomb still landed exactly where it was supposed to. There's a reason military history remembers missions like this so vividly. It's not just the technology, it's the sheer scale of trust involved. Trust between pilots and planners, trust between engineers and the weapons they built years earlier, hoping they would perform exactly as intended when the moment finally came. Trust between every single link in a chain that stretched across oceans, time zones, and years of preparation, all converging into a single, narrow window of time. Let's take a moment to think about what this event actually represents on a larger scale. This wasn't just about one bomb, or one night, or even one target. It was a demonstration of something much bigger. The idea that no matter how deep, how hidden, or how heavily protected something is, there may still exist a weapon somewhere in the world capable of reaching it. That is an extremely powerful and honestly unsettling idea. For decades, going deep underground was considered one of the ultimate forms of protection. Bury something far enough beneath solid rock, and conventional airstrikes simply could not touch it. This event challenged that entire assumption. It proved that with enough time, enough engineering, and enough precision, even the deepest secrets buried beneath a mountain are not necessarily safe forever. At the same time, this story raises important questions that go far beyond military technology. What does it mean when only 20 of the most powerful conventional bombs on Earth exist, and more than half of them are used in a single night? What happens to global military strategy when a weapon like this proves, in real combat, that it works exactly as designed? And perhaps, most importantly, what does this mean for the future, both for weapons development and for how nations think about building protected facilities going forward? There's a strange irony in all of this, too. The very same secrecy that protected this facility for years is the same kind of secrecy that surrounded the weapon built to destroy it. Two sides, both hiding, both preparing, both waiting for a moment neither could fully predict. In the end, only one side's preparation was tested in real conditions, on a real night, against a real target. And it held up. Military analysts have already started discussing what comes next, because a weapon that has now proven itself in real combat does not remain a secret capability forever. Other countries will study what happened. They will study how the facility was built, why it still wasn't enough, and what kind of new defensive measures might be needed to protect against a weapon like this in the future. In many ways, this single mission may quietly reshape how underground facilities are designed for decades to come. There's also something deeply human about this story that is easy to overlook. Behind every technical detail, every measurement, every fuse calculation, there were real decisions being made by real people carrying enormous responsibility. Military leaders had to weigh the risks. Engineers had to trust that 15 years of design work would hold up under the pressure of an actual mission. Pilots had to fly for hours through hostile airspace, knowing the weight, both physically and symbolically, of what they were carrying. And on the other side of this story, there is the broader geopolitical reality. A strike like this does not happen in isolation. It exists within years of tension, diplomacy, failed negotiations, and rising fear. Understanding the full weight of this moment means understanding everything that led up to it, not just the 8 seconds it might have taken for a single bomb to fall from an aircraft to its target far below. If you've made it this far into the video, I want to genuinely thank you, because that tells me you actually care about understanding stories like this beyond just the surface level headlines. Do me one favor before we continue. Hit subscribe if you haven't already, not because I'm asking for numbers, but because there are more stories like this coming, and I don't want you to miss them. So what actually happens next, after a mission like this? In the weeks that followed, military and intelligence agencies began the slow, careful process of assessing the true impact of the strike. This is where things get complicated, because destruction from the surface is easy to see. Destruction hundreds of feet underground inside sealed tunnels is much harder to measure. Specialized reconnaissance tools, satellite analysis, and intelligence gathering all played a role in trying to understand exactly how much damage had actually been done to the facility's internal capabilities. Officials were careful not to make bold claims too quickly. Even though the bombs had struck with remarkable precision, understanding the full extent of the underground damage would take additional time and analysis. This distinction between striking a target successfully and completely destroying its underlying capability is one that often gets lost in public conversation, but it matters immensely to the people responsible for evaluating military outcomes. At the same time, engineers and defense agencies began looking closely at data collected from the mission itself. Every bomb that was used offered valuable new information. How deep did it actually penetrate? How did the fuse timing perform under real-world conditions instead of controlled testing? What lessons could be learned to improve future versions of similar weapons? In many ways, this single mission became one of the most valuable data collection opportunities in the entire history of this weapon's development. That information does not disappear after the mission ends. It becomes the foundation for future design improvements, shaping how future bunker buster weapons might be built, refined, and eventually deployed if the need ever arises again. And that raises an important and somewhat uncomfortable question. If this weapon worked, and worked well, what does that mean for the handful of other nations around the world who have also been investing heavily in deep underground facilities as a form of ultimate protection? Facilities designed under the assumption that nothing could reach them. This mission may have quietly changed that calculation, not just for one country, but as a warning sign for anyone relying on depth alone as a defense strategy. It's easy to watch a story like this and only think about the explosions, the aircraft, the raw power involved. But if you zoom out, this event says something much bigger about the direction the entire world is heading. Military technology is no longer just about who has the biggest weapons. It's about who can solve incredibly specific, complex problems, reaching targets that seemed physically impossible to touch just a few decades ago. 15 years ago, a weapon capable of doing this did not fully exist in its current form. Today, it has already been used in real combat, and the lessons learned from that single night will likely influence military engineering decisions for years, maybe even decades, into the future. When you really sit with this story, the most incredible part isn't actually the size of the bomb, or even the raw power of the explosion deep underground. It's the sheer amount of patience behind it. 15 years of design, countless tests, some successful, some failures that had to be studied and corrected. Years of intelligence work just to understand exactly what needed to be destroyed and how deep it truly was buried. All of that quiet, invisible effort, building toward a single night that lasted only a few hours, but will likely be remembered and studied for decades. Only 20 of these bombs exist on the entire planet, and in one night, more than half of that global supply was used to answer a question that had been sitting unresolved for almost 2 decades. Can anything truly stay hidden and protected forever, no matter how deep it goes? Think back to that opening question for a moment. What if one bomb could reach a target buried so deep that almost nothing else on Earth could touch it? Now you know the answer isn't hypothetical anymore. It happened. It was tested under real pressure in real darkness, thousands of miles from home, and it worked exactly as it was built to work. The answer, at least on that one night in June, was no, and that single answer may end up changing how nations everywhere think about protection, secrecy, and survival for a very long time to come.